You're fired for being black. Boss says. His Korean investor buys the company and makes her CEO. The morning everything changed. Jane Moore's alarm went off at 5 a.m. She didn't need it. She'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, running through her presentation for the 100th time. Today was the day. 3 months of research, 400 hours of data analysis, countless sleepless nights perfecting every slide, every statistic, every word. Today, she would finally prove herself to the board. Today, Richard Sterling would have to acknowledge her brilliance. Today, everything would change. She climbed out of bed and stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. A beautiful black woman with natural curls she'd spent an hour perfecting last night, pulled back into a professional bun. Sharp, intelligent eyes that had seen too much doubt but refused to dim. A fire in her chest that had been burning since she was a little girl watching her father work 3 jobs to put her through college. "You've got this, Jane," she whispered to herself. She pulled on her best blazer, navy blue, tailored, professional. Her mother had helped her pick it out last month. "Baby, you're going to walk into that boardroom and show them who you are," her mother had said, tears in her eyes. "Your daddy would be so proud." Jane touched the small silver necklace around her neck, her father's last gift before he died. She kissed it softly. "This one's for you, Daddy. Watch me." She grabbed her tablet, her leather portfolio, and her coffee, then headed out the door at 6:47 a.m. The morning was cold and crisp. The city was just waking up. Jane walked to the subway station, headphones in, listening to Beyoncé for confidence. "I'm a survivor. I'm not gonna give up." She smiled. "Damn right." Sterling Corporation. 8:32 a.m. The building loomed over her like a glass and steel giant. Jane had worked here for 3 years, but today it felt different. Today felt like destiny. She walked through the lobby, nodding at security, smiling at the receptionist. Everyone knew today was her big presentation. A few colleagues gave her encouraging thumbs-ups. "Good luck, Jane. You're going to kill it. Show them what you've got." She rode the elevator to the 14th floor, heart pounding with anticipation, not fear. She was ready, more than ready. She entered the executive suite and was immediately greeted by her mentor, Margaret Wells, the VP of Human Resources. "Jane!" Margaret pulled her into a quick hug. "How are you feeling?" "Confident," Jane said, and she meant it. Margaret lowered her voice. "Listen, I know Richard can be difficult, but your presentation is solid. The board will see that. Just stay calm and don't let him get under your skin." Jane nodded. "I won't." But deep down, she knew Margaret was worried. Everyone knew Richard Sterling was a problem. A racist, sexist relic who had inherited his position and spent the last decade running the company into the ground while blaming everyone else for his failures. Jane had watched him dismiss brilliant ideas from women and people of color for 3 years. She'd watched him promote incompetent white men. She'd watched him create a toxic culture that drove away top talent. But today was different. Today, her presentation was so undeniable, so backed by data and research, that even Richard couldn't ignore it. At least that's what she told herself. The boardroom. 9:47 a.m. The room smelled like expensive cologne, leather, and old money. 12 executives sat around the massive glass table. Richard Sterling sat at the head like a king on his throne. Mid-50s, graying at the temples. An expensive suit that couldn't hide his mediocrity. He was everything Jane despised. Arrogant, cruel, comfortable in his unearned power. Jane took a deep breath and stood, tablet in hand. "Good morning, gentlemen," she began, voice steady and strong. "The campaign I'm about to present will save this company $8.4 million in wasted expenditure and increase our market share by 43% within 9 months. A few eyebrows raised. Robert Chen, the VP of Finance, leaned forward slightly, interested. Richard leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, that familiar condescending smirk already forming on his face. "By all means, Jane," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Enlighten us." Jane ignored the tone. She'd heard it 1,000 times. She clicked to her first slide. Sterling Corporation, a company in crisis. The slide showed declining revenue charts, missed market opportunities, and competitors who were thriving while Sterling slowly died. For the past 5 years, Jane began, walking around the table with confident authority. This company has been hemorrhaging money, not because of market conditions, not because of economic downturns, but because of poor leadership and outdated strategies. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Richard's smirk faltered slightly. Jane clicked to the next slide. The 3 fatal mistakes. Mistake number 1. We've ignored key growth demographics. Gen Z and millennials represent 67% of purchasing power in our target markets. Yet our marketing strategies are designed for baby boomers. She pulled up consumer data, charts, graphs, undeniable statistics. Mistake number 2. We've failed to expand internationally. Southeast Asian markets are growing at 12% annually. Our competitors have already established dominance there. We haven't even tried. More data, more proof. Mistake number 3. Our internal culture is toxic. In the past year alone, we've lost 34% of our top talent. Exit interviews cite poor management, lack of diversity, and hostile work environments. She looked directly at Richard. These aren't opinions. These are facts. Robert Chin nodded slowly. Jane, this is eye-opening. Margaret Wells looked impressed. Even the skeptics seemed interested. Jane clicked to her next slide. The solution. For the next 25 minutes, Jane systematically dismantled every outdated strategy and replaced it with innovative, research-backed solutions. She showed them how to target younger demographics through TikTok campaigns, influencer partnerships, and authentic brand storytelling. She presented a detailed expansion plan for Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, complete with market analysis, risk assessments, and projected ROI. She outlined a complete cultural overhaul, diversity hiring initiatives, leadership training, employee wellness programs. Every slide was flawless. Every statistic verified. Every projection conservative enough to be credible but ambitious enough to excite. She concluded with a final slide. Projected results. Plus 43% market share. Plus $47 million revenue increase. Minus 34% employee turnover. These aren't dreams, Jane said, voice strong and unwavering. These are achievable goals, and I can deliver them. She looked around the table. Questions. Silence. Robert Chin broke it first. Jane, this is extraordinary. I don't know what to say. Margaret Wells smiled. I think you just saved this company. Even the most skeptical board members looked impressed. Jane's heart soared. She had done it. Finally. Then Richard Sterling started clapping. Slow. Mocking. Each clap echoing through the room like a gunshot. Wow, Jane, he said, voice dripping with venom disguised as praise. That was something. Jane's stomach dropped. She knew that tone. Richard stood, buttoning his suit jacket with exaggerated slowness. Really impressive. All those charts, all those big words, all that passion. He walked toward her, hands in his pockets, casual cruelty radiating from every step. But here's the thing, Jane. He stopped inches from her, invading her space, making sure everyone saw his dominance. I don't think this company needs your urban perspective anymore. The room froze. Jane's pulse quickened. Excuse me? You've been a distraction, Richard continued smoothly. Always pushing your diversity agenda. Always trying to change things that work perfectly fine. I just presented a strategy that could save this company millions. You're fired. The words hit like a physical blow. Jane blinked, disbelief flooding her chest. On what grounds? Richard looked her up and down slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone in the room witnessed his contempt. Then he said the words that would destroy her life and go viral within hours. You're fired for being black. Gasps rippled through the room like shockwaves. Robert Chen's face went pale. Margaret Wells covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. A few board members looked away, unable to meet Jane's eyes. No one spoke. No one defended her. No one stood. Jane felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. Rage, humiliation, shock, betrayal. All of it crashed into her at once, stealing her breath, crushing her chest. You can't, she stammered. Security, Richard called, not even looking at her anymore, dismissing her like trash. Escort Ms. Moore out of the building. Immediately, 2 guards appeared at the door like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. Jane stood frozen, fists clenched, heart hammering, mind screaming. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Richard said with a smile that made her skin crawl. Jane looked around the room desperately. At Robert, who had just called her presentation extraordinary but now couldn't meet her eyes. At Margaret, her mentor, who had tears streaming down her face but said nothing. At the board members who had nodded along with her ideas but now sat in cowardly silence. Say something. Somebody say something. No one did. Cowards. All of them. Jane straightened her spine with every ounce of dignity she had left. She grabbed her tablet with trembling hands and walked toward the door, head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The guards flanked her but didn't touch her. Even they seemed uncomfortable. As she passed Richard, she stopped, turned, looked him dead in the eye. I will remember this, she said quietly, voice shaking with barely controlled rage. And so will the world. Richard laughed. A cruel, dismissive sound. Good luck with that, sweetheart. The walk of shame. The hallway felt endless. Jane walked past cubicles where colleagues peeked over their computers, phones raised, recording everything. Oh my God. Is that Jane? She's being escorted out by security. Did she get fired? Someone said Richard fired her for being black. No way, that can't be real. It's on video, I just saw it. Whispers. Stares. Cameras. Jane kept walking. Shoulders back. Head high. 1 foot in front of the other. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She pushed through the glass doors into the bright morning sun. Flash. 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 Cameras everywhere. Reporters swarming like vultures who smelled blood. Ms. Moore. Ms. Moore. Is it true you were fired for racial discrimination? Jane. How do you respond to Sterling Corporation's actions? Ms. Moore. Do you plan to sue? Jane. Over here. What are you going to do next? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Her throat was too tight. Her chest too heavy. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouted questions, the flashing cameras, the microphones shoved in her face. She reached her car, fumbled with her keys, finally got the door open. The moment it closed, she broke. Sobs tore from her chest. Violent, uncontrollable, the kind of crying that shakes your entire body and steals your breath. She gripped the steering wheel, gasping for air, drowning in humiliation and rage. Her phone started buzzing. Text messages flooding in. Jane. Oh my God. I just saw what happened. I'm so sorry. That was horrible. Are you okay? I can't believe Richard said that. Let me know if you need anything. Jane. I wanted to say something but I couldn't. I'm so sorry. Empty words. Useless sympathy from cowards who watched her get destroyed and did nothing. Then her mother called. Jane answered, voice cracking. Mama. Baby, I just saw it. I saw the whole thing. Someone posted a video and it's everywhere. Jane's stomach dropped. It's already online? Yes, baby. It's going viral. Jane closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Her mother's voice was fierce. Listen to me. This is not your ending. You hear me? This is not your ending, Jane. That man is evil and the world is going to see it. You are brilliant. You are strong. And you are going to rise from this. Mama. My career is over, Jane whispered. No one's going to hire me after this. Then you make your own way, her mother said firmly. Your daddy didn't raise no quitter. You hear me? Jane nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. I hear you. I love you, baby. I love you too, Mama. Jane hung up and sat in her car for another 20 minutes, crying until she had no tears left. Then she drove home in numb silence. 3 weeks later, Jane's tiny apartment felt like a prison. She sat on her couch in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, laptop open, staring at the screen with hollow eyes. The video had 28 million views. Hashtag Justice for Jane was trending worldwide. News outlets had covered it. Think pieces had been written. Protests had been organized outside Sterling Corporation. But none of it mattered, because Jane couldn't get a job. 62 applications sent. 62 rejections received. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. While your qualifications are impressive, we don't feel you're the right fit at this time. We're concerned about the controversy surrounding your previous employment. We appreciate your interest, but we've chosen to pursue other options. She was blacklisted, toxic, the woman who caused a scandal. Her savings were almost gone. Rent was due in 2 days. Her mother kept trying to send money from her tiny pension, money Jane refused to take. She was drowning, suffocating, disappearing. Her phone buzzed. Another rejection email. Jane closed her laptop and walked to the window, staring out at the city that had chewed her up and spit her out. "I'm not giving up," she whispered to herself, voice hollow. "I'm not." But she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. She didn't know that across the city, someone was watching. Someone who had been watching for weeks. Someone who was about to change everything. Meanwhile, Victor Hahn's penthouse office. Victor Hahn stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered with ruthless precision. He was watching the video, again, for the 89th time. His sharp, calculating eyes studied every frame. Jane's confidence as she walked into that boardroom, the brilliance of her presentation, the fire in her eyes as she defended her ideas. And then Richard Sterling's words, caught on camera for the world to see. "You're fired for being black." Victor's jaw tightened. His fingers drummed once against the glass. He had built an empire from nothing. He'd crushed competitors across 3 continents. He was feared in boardrooms from Seoul to New York. Men twice his age trembled when he entered a room. But watching this woman, this brilliant, fierce, unstoppable woman, be humiliated by a mediocre, racist coward who feared her, something in him snapped. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of acquisitions. "James." "Yes, sir." "Sterling Corporation. I want a full report on my desk in 2 hours. Financial records, stock information, board member profiles, shareholder data, debt obligations, every asset, every liability, every weakness." A pause. "Sir, are you planning to?" "I'm buying it." Silence on the other end. "Sir, that's a $2.3 billion acquisition. I want 51% controlling shares by tomorrow morning." Victor continued, voice cold and final. "Use whatever resources necessary. Offshore accounts if needed. Shell companies. I don't care about the cost. Sir, with all due respect, this seems personal." Victor's eyes darkened. "It is. Do it." "Yes, sir. Right away." He hung up. Victor looked at Jane's face frozen on the screen, intelligent eyes blazing with defiance even as she was being destroyed. "You don't know me yet," he murmured to the image. "But you will." He made another call. Background check on Jane Moore. Everything. Education, employment history, financial situation, family, references. "I want to know who she is." Within 3 hours, the report arrived. Victor read it carefully. Jane Elizabeth Moore, age 28, graduated top of her class from Columbia University, MBA from Wharton. Father deceased, worked 3 jobs to put her through school. Mother, retired teacher, living on a pension. No criminal record, spotless reputation, brilliant recommendations from every previous employer. Financial situation, dire, savings depleted, rent overdue. Victor's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his chest. She's drowning, and no one's helping her. He made one final call. "Purchase complete?" "Yes, sir. You now own 51% of Sterling Corporation. Congratulations." Victor allowed himself a small, cold smile. "Schedule an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Attendance mandatory." "Yes, sir." "And what about Richard Sterling?" "He'll be there," Victor said quietly, "because I want to watch his face when I destroy him." The next morning, Sterling Corporation, 8:53 a.m. Richard Sterling walked into his office whistling, coffee in hand, feeling invincible. The scandal had blown over faster than expected. A carefully worded public statement. A few strategic donations to civil rights organizations for optics. The media cycle had moved on. Crisis averted. He sat down at his desk and opened his email. Then his assistant burst through the door, face ghost white, hands trembling. "Sir, we have a serious problem." Richard frowned, annoyed. "What now, Patricia?" "The board just called an emergency meeting. It's mandatory. It starts in 7 minutes. I didn't authorize any emergency meeting." "Sir, you don't understand." Patricia's voice shook. "Someone bought the company. Overnight. 51% controlling shares." The coffee cup slipped from Richard's hand, crashing to the floor. "What?" "A Korean investment firm. The majority shareholder is..." She swallowed hard. "Victor Han." Richard's blood turned to ice. Victor Han. The name alone sent shockwaves through the business world. A billionaire investor known for hostile takeovers and ruthless corporate restructuring. A man who destroyed companies and rebuilt them in his image. A man you didn't cross. Ever. Where is he?" Richard stammered. "In the boardroom. He's waiting for you." Richard's hands trembled as he stood. He tried to compose himself, straighten his tie, force confidence into his stride. But his heart was pounding. This can't be happening. He walked toward the boardroom, each step heavier than the last. The boardroom. 9 a.m. Richard pushed open the door. The room was silent. Every board member was already seated, faces pale, expressions terrified. And at the head of the table, in Richard's chair, sat a man Richard had only seen in business magazines. Victor Han. Tall. Impeccably dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than Richard's car. Sharp features. Dark, calculating eyes that seemed to see through everything. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, radiating power and danger. He didn't stand when Richard entered, didn't acknowledge him, just watched him with those cold, unreadable eyes. "Mr. Han," Richard said, forcing a smile, trying to sound confident. "This is unexpected. I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled. Sit down." The command was soft, lethal. Richard sat, heart hammering. Victor leaned back slightly, studying Richard like an insect under glass. "You made a mistake, Mr. Sterling." Richard swallowed. "I'm sorry. I don't know what you're referring to." "Jane Moore." The name hit Richard like a punch. The room went deathly silent. Victor's expression didn't change. "You fired her because of the color of her skin." That's not true," Richard stammered. "That video was taken out of context. I watched it 89 times, Victor said quietly. "Each time, your words were exactly the same. You're fired for being black." Richard's face flushed. "It was a misunderstanding." "No." Victor's voice dropped to ice. "It was racism. Blatant. Recorded. Undeniable." He stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "I now own 51% of this company. Every asset, every contract, every decision flows through me." He walked around the table, footsteps echoing like a countdown. Richard's breath came faster. "Mr. Han, please. I'm sure we can." Victor stopped behind Richard's chair. "My first decision is very simple." He leaned down, voice a whisper that everyone heard. "You're fired." Richard shot to his feet. "You can't do this. I built this company. I have contracts, legal protections. I'll sue. Security." Two large men appeared at the door instantly. "Escort Mr. Sterling out of the building. Immediately. If he resists, call the police and have him arrested for trespassing." The guards moved forward. "No, you can't do this," Richard shouted, face red with rage and terror. "I'll destroy you. I have connections. Lawyers. This isn't over." The guards grabbed his arms. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am?" They dragged him toward the door as he fought and screamed. Victor watched, expression unchanged. As Richard was pulled through the doorway, he turned back, eyes wild. "You'll regret this. You hear me? This isn't over." The door slammed shut. Silence. Victor returned to his seat, adjusting his cuffs calmly. The board members stared at him, terrified and awed. "Now," Victor said, voice returning to professional calm. Let's discuss the future of this company. He pulled out a file and placed it on the table. I'm appointing a new CEO, someone with vision, intelligence, integrity. He looked around the table. Her name is Jane Moore, gasped. Margaret Wells spoke first, voice shaking. Mr. Hahn, while I deeply respect Jane, some might question whether she has the experience. She presented a strategy 3 weeks ago that would have saved this company millions. Victor cut in. Did any of you defend her? Silence. Shame. That's what I thought. Victor's gaze was sharp. Jane Moore is the most qualified person for this position. The vote is a formality, but I'll take it anyway. All in favor. One by one, hands rose. Unanimous. Excellent. Victor stood. Meeting adjourned. I'll have Ms. Moore here by Monday. He walked out, leaving the board in stunned silence. Jane's apartment. 2:34 p.m. Jane was staring at her laptop, numbly scrolling through another rejection email, when the knock came. Firm. Professional. Unexpected. She wasn't expecting anyone. Heart pounding with vague anxiety, she walked to the door and opened it. 2 men in expensive suits stood in the hallway. Professional. Polite. Intimidating. Ms. Moore. Her throat tightened. Yes. We represent Victor Hahn. He requests your presence immediately. Jane's heart skipped. She knew that name. Everyone did. Korean billionaire. Ruthless investor. Corporate predator. Why? She asked, voice cautious. He'll explain in person. Please, come with us. Every instinct screamed danger, but curiosity and desperate hope won. She grabbed her coat, locked her door, and followed them to a black luxury car waiting on the street. Victor Hahn's penthouse. 3:12 p.m. The elevator opened directly into the most stunning space Jane had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the entire city. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Abstract art on the walls. Everything screamed wealth, power, control. And standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, perfect posture, black suit tailored to perfection. Ms. Moore, he said without turning. Thank you for coming. His voice was deep, controlled, with a subtle Korean accent that made every word sound deliberate and dangerous. Jane's pulse quickened. I didn't have much choice. He turned slowly. Jane's breath caught. He was devastating. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her soul. Black hair styled perfectly. An aura of controlled power that made her want to step back and step closer at the same time. You're right, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. But I prefer honesty. He walked toward her. Slow, measured, each step calculated. Let me be direct, Ms. Moore. I bought Sterling Corporation. As of yesterday, I own 51% controlling shares. Jane blinked, mind spinning. You, what? Why? Victor stopped a few feet away, eyes locked on hers. Because what Richard Sterling did to you was unacceptable. Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Jane's hands trembled. You bought a $2 billion company because he fired me? No, Victor said. I bought it because it was undervalued, poorly managed, and positioned for strategic restructuring. A sound investment. He stepped closer. Firing Richard Sterling? That was personal. Jane's chest tightened with a confusing storm of emotions. Gratitude, suspicion, disbelief, hope. What do you want from me? She whispered. Victor's gaze intensified. I want you to be CEO. Jane laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. You're joking. I never joke about business, Ms. Moore. She shook her head, stepping back. I don't need your pity. This isn't pity, Victor interrupted, voice sharp. I watched your presentation. It was brilliant, strategic, exactly what that company needs. He moved closer, closing the distance. I don't make emotional decisions. I make profitable ones. And you, Ms. Moore, are the most profitable decision I can make. Jane's hands shook. Why should I trust you? You're a stranger, a billionaire who could destroy me with one word. How do I know this isn't manipulation? Victor's expression softened, barely perceptible. but there. Because I'm giving you what you earned. Not charity. Not sympathy. What you deserve. Tears burned behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. And if I say no? Then I respect your decision, Victor said. But you'll spend your life wondering what you could have built. Jane stared at him. This dangerous, unreadable man who had just turned her entire world upside down. She thought about the rejection emails, the rent she couldn't pay, her mother's worried voice, the humiliation that still burned. And she thought about her father, what he would say. Baby girl, never let fear make your decisions. Jane took a deep breath. When do I start? Victor's lips curved, almost a smile. Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. Jane stood outside the building, staring up at the new sign. Hahn Corporation. Richard Sterling's legacy, erased overnight like he never existed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her palms were sweaty despite the cool morning air. But she straightened her spine, adjusted her blazer, and walked through those glass doors like she owned the place. Because now she did. The lobby fell silent the moment she entered. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the whispers started, rippling through the space like wildfire. Is that Jane Moore? She's back. I heard she's the new CEO. No way. After what happened? Victor Hahn appointed her himself. This is insane. Jane didn't look at any of them. She kept her eyes forward, head high, walking toward the elevator with purpose and grace. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. Just before they closed, she heard someone whisper, "She's got guts. I'll give her that." The doors slid shut, and Jane finally exhaled. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished steel. A woman who had been broken, humiliated, thrown away like garbage just weeks ago. And now she was about to walk into the office of the man who destroyed her and claim it as her own. The elevator dinged. 14th floor. The doors opened. Victor Hahn was waiting. He stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark eyes tracked her every movement as she stepped out. "Ms. Moore," he said, voice low and controlled. "Mr. Hahn," she replied, matching his formal tone. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval? Amusement? She couldn't tell. He gestured down the hallway. "Shall we?" They walked side by side toward the executive suite. Every employee they passed stopped what they were doing, stared, whispered. Jane felt every gaze like a weight on her shoulders. Every judgment, every flicker of resentment and disbelief. She doesn't deserve this. She only got it because Victor Hahn feels guilty. This won't last. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He heard them too, but he said nothing, just kept walking with that calm, lethal confidence. They reached the corner office. Victor opened the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. Jane walked in and stopped breathing. The space was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a panoramic view of the entire city. A massive desk made of dark mahogany. Leather chairs. Modern art on the walls. Power carved into every square inch. Richard Sterling's things were gone. Completely erased. In their place, a sleek silver nameplate on the desk. Jane Moore, CEO. Her throat tightened. Tears threatened. This is real. This is actually real. Victor closed the door softly, giving her privacy. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, letting her process. "This is yours now," he said quietly. "Every decision, every contract, every strategy. You run this company." Jane turned to him, emotions swirling. "And you? What's your role?" He glanced over his shoulder. "I'm the majority shareholder, the board chairman. I'll be present when necessary. But this," he gestured to the office, "is your domain." She studied him, still searching for the catch, the hidden agenda. The moment he would reveal this was all a game. But all she saw was sincerity. Cold, controlled, dangerous sincerity. "Why me?" she whispered. "Out of everyone you could have chosen, why me?" Victor turned fully to face her. For a long moment he didn't answer. His eyes traced her face. Her lips, her eyes, the fire that refused to die despite everything she'd been through. Because watching a man like Richard Sterling destroy someone like you. His voice dropped, rough and raw. I couldn't allow it. Jane's breath caught. He took a step closer. Then another. Slow. Deliberate. The air between them thickened with tension. You deserved better, he said quietly. And I intend to make sure you get it. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Before she could respond, a sharp knock interrupted. Victor's expression shifted instantly. Back to cold, back to controlled. Come in. The door opened. Margaret Wells stepped inside, looking nervous and hopeful. Mr. Hahn. Ms. Moore. She smiled at Jane, tears in her eyes. Jane, I'm so glad you're here. Jane's chest tightened. Margaret had been her mentor, but she'd also stayed silent when Richard fired her. Margaret, Jane said coolly. Margaret flinched at the tone. Jane, I need you to know how sorry I am. I should have spoken up. I should have defended you. I was a coward, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Silence. Jane didn't make it easy for her. Yes, you should have. Margaret nodded, accepting the judgment. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I want you to know. I'm here now. Whatever you need. Jane softened slightly. We'll see. Victor interrupted. The board is assembled. They're waiting. Margaret nodded and left. Jane turned to Victor. The board. They want to meet their new CEO, Victor said, hint of amusement in his voice. Some are skeptical. Jane's spine straightened. Let them be. Victor's lips curved. Almost a smile. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. The boardroom. 9:15 a.m. 14 faces stared at Jane as she entered. 12 men. 2 women. All older, richer, more established than she'd ever been. Some looked curious. Most looked hostile. A few looked terrified of Victor. Victor entered first, commanding instant silence. Jane followed, refusing to show nerves. Gentlemen, ladies, Victor said, voice cutting through the tension. This is Jane Moore, your new CEO. A heavy silence filled the room. Then a man at the far end, gray hair, expensive watch, condescension radiating from every pore, leaned back in his chair. With all due respect, Mr. Hahn, he said slowly, this is highly unconventional. Unconventional how, Mr. Peterson? Jane asked sharply. The man blinked, surprised she'd spoken. Well, you don't have experience running a company of this scale. I have 7 years of experience in marketing, strategy, and operations, Jane interrupted. I've increased revenue for 3 different corporations by an average of 37%. I've led teams of over 200 people. I've saved companies millions in wasted expenditure. She leaned forward, eyes locked on his. What I don't have is patience for men who underestimate me because of how I look. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Victor watched from his seat, expression unreadable. But something gleamed in his eyes. Another board member, Robert Chen, spoke up. Ms. Moore, what's your vision for this company? Jane didn't hesitate. She pulled out her tablet, connected to the screen, and launched the same presentation Richard Sterling had mocked. But this time, she owned it. For 35 minutes, she systematically dismantled every outdated strategy and replaced it with innovative data-backed solutions. She showed them market analysis, consumer behavior studies, competitor assessments, financial projections that were conservative but ambitious. She outlined plans to cut costs by 24%, expand into Southeast Asian markets, rebrand to capture younger demographics, restructure leadership to reflect diversity and innovation. Every slide was flawless, every statistic verified, every word undeniable. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Not skeptical silence, respectful silence. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. That's exceptional, Ms. Moore. Robert Chen nodded. I think we just witnessed the future of this company. Margaret Wells smiled, tears in her eyes. Welcome back, Jane. Victor leaned forward. All in favor of confirming Jane Moore as CEO? 14 hands rose. Unanimous. Jane exhaled. She had won. 3 months later, the transformation was extraordinary. Under Jane's leadership, Hahn Corporation launched 3 major campaigns. Social media engagement tripled. Website traffic increased by 160%. Sales in Southeast Asian markets exceeded projections by 28%. Employee morale skyrocketed. Jane restructured the entire leadership team, firing deadweight and bringing in diverse talent. She implemented wellness programs, mental health days, and transparent promotion criteria. Exit interviews turned into retention conversations. People wanted to work there again. The company culture shifted from toxic to thriving. And through it all, Victor Han watched. He attended every major meeting, sat quietly in the back during presentations, offered advice when asked, challenged her when necessary, but he never undermined her, never overruled her, never made her feel like anything less than the leader she was. And Jane was falling. She tried to fight it, tried to keep things professional. But late nights reviewing contracts turned into long conversations about philosophy, ambition, fear. Strategy sessions turned into debates that crackled with intellectual and sexual tension. She noticed everything about him. The way his jaw tightened when he was thinking. The rare moments his control slipped and warmth flickered in his eyes. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. And he noticed her too. She felt it constantly. The weight of his gaze. The way the air shifted when he was near. One night, after a particularly brutal negotiation with a Singapore-based investor, Jane collapsed onto the leather couch in Victor's penthouse office. "I'm exhausted," she groaned, kicking off her heels. Victor poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. "You handled that brilliantly." She raised an eyebrow. "Just brilliantly?" "Exceptionally," he corrected, sitting beside her. "Too close. Not close enough." Jane took a sip, letting the burn ground her. The city glittered below them, beautiful and indifferent. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. "Always. Why did you really buy this company?" Victor's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "I told you. Strategic acquisition." "That's not the whole truth," Jane pressed, turning to face him. Victor was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I watched that video 89 times. Jane's breath caught. "What?" "The video of Richard Sterling firing you. I watched it 89 times. His voice dropped, raw and honest in a way she'd never heard. "Each time, I saw the same thing. A brilliant woman being destroyed by a mediocre man who feared her. And I." He paused, jaw tightening. "I couldn't allow it." Jane's throat tightened. "You didn't even know me." "No," he admitted, turning to face her fully. "But I recognized something in you. Fire. Strength. The refusal to break even when the world tried to destroy you. The space between them felt impossibly small. I've built an empire, Jane. Made billions. Crushed competitors. Dominated markets across 3 continents. But I've never met anyone who made me feel like power means nothing without someone worth protecting." Jane's heart hammered. "Victor." He reached out, slow and controlled, cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed her cheek, sending electricity through her entire body. "Tell me I'm wrong," he whispered. "Tell me you don't feel this." She couldn't, because she did. God, she did. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, leaning closer. She didn't. He kissed her. Slow, deep, devastating. Jane's hands slid into his hair, pulling him closer. Every wall she'd built shattered. Every rule she'd set broke. He kissed her like he'd been holding back for months, like she was air and he was drowning. Her back pressed against the couch. His body covered hers, warm and solid and overwhelming. His hand slid to her waist, gripping firmly, possessively. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark, burning with intensity. "I don't want to control you," he said, voice rough. "I want you to choose me." Jane cupped his face, thumb brushing his jaw. "I already have." He kissed her again, deeper, hungrier, and this time neither of them held back. 6 months later, Han Corporation's annual report was the talk of the business world. Revenue up 51%. Stock prices increased by 73%. Expansion into 3 new international markets. Employee retention at an all-time high. Jane Moore was being called a visionary, a game changer, one of the most brilliant CEOs of her generation. She stood at the Global Business Summit, addressing thousands of entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders. "When I was fired for the color of my skin," she said, voice strong and unwavering, "I thought my career was over. I thought I'd lost everything." The audience was silent, captivated. "But what I learned is this: your setback is not your ending. Your humiliation is not your identity. The people who try to destroy you are just making room for your rise." Thunderous applause erupted. People stood cheering. To every woman, every person of color, every person who's been told they're not enough, you are brilliant, you are powerful, and your story isn't over. The crowd roared. In the front row, Victor watched her with quiet, unshakable pride. When she stepped off stage, he was waiting in the wings. "Incredible," he said, pulling her close. She laughed, breathless and glowing. "I meant every word." He kissed her forehead. "I know you did." They walked out together, hand in hand, ignoring the cameras flashing around them. 2 months later, Jane was working late in her office when Victor entered, holding a small black velvet box. Her heart stopped. "Victor." He walked to her desk, set the box down, and looked at her with those intense dark eyes. "Open it." With trembling hands, she did. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, perfect. A single diamond that caught the light and sparkled like captured starlight. Victor came around the desk and knelt beside her chair. "Jane Moore," he said softly, "you're the strongest, most brilliant woman I've ever known. You challenged me, changed me, made me believe in something more than power and profit." Tears filled her eyes. "You made me believe in partnership, in love, in building something together that's greater than either of us alone." He took her hand. "Will you marry me?" Jane couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only nod as tears streamed down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed, deep and sure, sealing a promise that had been building since the moment they met. 1 year later, Jane and Victor stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new Han Corporation headquarters. A building designed with sustainability, accessibility, and beauty in mind. A symbol of everything they'd built together. Reporters swarmed. "Ms. Moore, how does it feel to be named CEO of the year?" "Jane, what's your message to young women in business?" "Mr. Han, what's it like working alongside your wife?" Jane smiled, squeezing Victor's hand. "It's been the greatest honor of my life to lead this company. And to every young woman out there, never let anyone tell you who you can be. Write your own story." Victor leaned into the microphone. "My wife is the most brilliant business mind of our generation. I'm just lucky she chose to build this empire with me." The crowd applauded. That night, they stood on the balcony of their penthouse, the city glittering below. "Can you believe this?" Jane whispered, leaning against him. "A year and a half ago, I thought my life was over." Victor wrapped his arms around her waist. "And now you're unstoppable." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "We're unstoppable." He kissed her slow and deep. "I love you," she murmured against his lips. "I love you more," he replied. But across the city, in a dark apartment, someone was watching the news coverage. A woman with cold eyes and a burning hatred. Richard Sterling's daughter, Victoria Sterling. She had been planning, waiting, gathering resources, and now she was ready to destroy everything Jane and Victor had built. Because in her mind, Jane Moore had stolen her father's company, and Victoria Sterling always got revenge. Jane Moore went from being fired for the color of her skin to becoming one of the most powerful CEOs in the world. Victor Han went from a cold, calculated investor to a man who learned that love and partnership were more valuable than any empire. Together, they proved that your worst moment doesn't define you. Your rise does. Richard Sterling faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of racism and arrogance. And Jane? Jane became the woman everyone remembered. The woman who refused to break. The woman who turned humiliation into power. The woman who proved that you don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. You just need to believe in yourself. So what would you have done in Jane's position? Drop a comment and let me know. If the story hit you the same way it hit me, go ahead and like this video, and subscribe for more stories about people who turned their rock bottom into their comeback. I'll see you in the next one.